Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is TJ Hill, and I'll be your MC today. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I currently serve as the Executive Director of the Disability Community Resource Center, DCRC, an independent living center located in Mar Vista that serves people with disabilities across Western Los Angeles County. I have over 20 years of policy experience in intersectional social justice relating to disability, special education, mental health, healthcare, employment, labor, and housing. This work is important to me because not only is housing a human right, but these issues directly intersect with my lifelong work in disability. I want to tell you a little bit about that with a story about one of the reasons I do this work. A few years ago, on Christmas Eve, when most of us, including myself, were enjoying time with our families in the safety of our homes, a man was stabbed on the Venice boardwalk. I saw the small blurb in the newspaper: African American, male, in his late 50s, stabbed after attending a free Christmas Eve dinner provided to unhoused community members. Well, it turns out that man was a member of the DCRC community. He was a wheelchair user whose disability resulted from a workplace accident in the 1990s. He only recently became homeless after first living with extended family, then couch surfing, and finally living in his car. It turns out the reason that he was stabbed was his wheelchair. His mobility device was seen as the only thing of value he had, and that was worth more than his life. That tragic story of our member, our friend, our neighbor, is an unacceptable consequence of homelessness in Los Angeles. As a person with a disability and the leader of an independent living center, I see the disproportionate impact homelessness has on my community. The discrimination that people with disabilities face every day is amplified when it comes to housing. Whether it's finding safe, affordable, accessible housing, or just maintaining employment to afford a home, the dream of living an independent, full life in a supportive and welcoming community is just that, a dream. It is time that we make that dream of independent living a reality for everyone. That is why I've dedicated myself to ending homelessness through our work at the center. And thankfully, as you'll hear today, I'm not alone in that work. Today's program will explore the ways in which disabilities impact the daily lives of our unhoused neighbors. I encourage you to listen to today's stories with an open mind and heart. Our unhoused neighbors living with disabilities experience especially difficult challenges. Like many without stable housing, people living with disabilities are tasked with finding a safe place to sleep every night, a task that becomes all the more daunting if you're a woman with paraplegia or a man with blindness or low vision. And it's no secret that LA severely lacks housing that is affordable and accessible. But there are so many people, like those that you'll hear from today, working to make housing and other critical resources in LA more equitable and accessible. So with that, let's hear from some of the folks breaking down social, economic, and attitudinal barriers to create a more just and inclusive world. Please welcome today's first speaker, Vicki Vickers. Vicki is a Speak Up advocate and a caseworker at the Downtown Women's Center. Vicki experienced homelessness when her livelihood began to deteriorate due to her mental health. She was able to manage the trauma of her diagnosis and the trauma of living on the street with the support of the people around her and a kind stranger who took the effort to reach out to her time and time again until she was ready to accept the help she needed. Her path to healing led her to the Downtown Women's Center, where she found both refuge and services she needed. Vicki is now a case manager for the center's Project Room Key Bridge Housing, where she helps place women into the hotel. She has also helped many of the women find permanent housing. Vicki knows how to help others because she can recall feeling abandoned, hopeless, and a dark feeling that only someone who has experienced homelessness can understand. Please welcome Vicki.
Hi, my name is Vicki, and I'm a CSH advocate. I was homeless for 4.5 years. I have schizophrenia. My medication had stopped working. I didn't recognize the symptoms. Instead of seeking treatment, I ran away from everything I'd ever known and loved. I found a park behind the old Santa Monica Library. There were homeless vets there. Now see, in my delusions of paranoia, having schizophrenia, and my medication not working, I thought enemy armies were invading America and they were going to kill everyone I knew and loved. There were vets living in that park that I found behind the old Santa Monica Library. And being I thought enemy armies were invading America, I thought they were safe to live around. And they were, for 4.5 years. They looked after me to the best of their ability. Most days, living there, I would wake up and I'd leave by 5 o'clock in the morning so the police wouldn't ask me to leave. I walked around in circles, screaming at walls, yelling at enemies only I heard and saw. It was terrible. Over those years, this man from the neighborhood had been stopping by and dropping off groceries from the pantry. I would ignore him most times and hope that he wouldn't even notice me. But I got sick over those years. I had a bronchitis that wouldn't go away. I'd cough so hard I couldn't breathe. I had sores all over my body from not being clean. And he noticed how sick I'd become. He asked me to go to OPCC, Ocean Park Community Center. And I did. There I was able to see a doctor. He was able to get me an emergency bed at the day center for women. From there, I went into transitional housing for 8 months. And then I found permanent supportive housing at the Downtown Women's Center. My first year at the Downtown Women's Center, I stabilized on medication and remembered who I am again. I became an advocate the next year for CSH. I speak up for people who don't have a voice, who aren't able to explain what they need, to people like politicians, policymakers, sheriff's departments, and others who just maybe don't understand what a homeless person is. A person just like me. Somebody who just has problems and maybe needs a little support. I am now a full-time employee for the Downtown Women's Center. I am a case manager for 56 women at a project room Quayside. And I am directly responsible for housing them and making sure that their needs are met. I'm a person who's proud of myself now. Thank you. My name is Vicki Vickers, and I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Vicki, for sharing your deeply personal and inspiring story. It is incredible to hear how you survived homelessness, found housing, and then turned back to give back to lift up others. We need more people like you, Vicki. Next up is Anthony Ruffin. Anthony has been working in the field of social services for over 19 years. During this time, he has participated in the piloting and implementation of new programs in Los Angeles targeting the most vulnerable and at-risk persons living on the streets or in hospitals in Los Angeles. Prior to working with the Department of Mental Health, Anthony served as an outreach specialist throughout the County of Los Angeles with homeless services providers serving spas 2, 4, 5, and 6. He has extensive experience working with some of the most challenged and underserved populations in LA, including those experiencing chronic homelessness. Please welcome Anthony.
Hello, my name is Anthony Ruffin, and I work for the Department of Mental Health. I've been doing outreach in the community of Los Angeles for the last 12 years. And I'm here to speak about the last 14 months in social services and what inspired me. For me, it all started at Doc Waller um, last April, in 2020 April. Um, and I got to be a fly on a wall and watch these incredible people come together to protect our homeless population from catching COVID and have a concrete plan on how to deal with individuals, especially the homeless population with COVID. And I got to work with Cherie Teredoff, Dr. Sharon, Dr. Heidi, Dr. Emily Thomas, Dr. Stacks, DMH staff, Latina, Dr. Rab, and a host of other people that all came together during this crazy time in social services where we didn't know too much about COVID and all of these different things. And just to be there at Dockwater to watch these incredible people step up to the plate, boots on the ground, walk the trailers, feed people, be on a phone for 8, 9, 10 hours at Dockwater. And Cherie was there 16, 17 hours. Dr. Emily Thomas spent the night there, I don't know how many nights. And Dr. Heidi just performed this incredible work and just bit out this plane that we call LA County's response to COVID. So thank you very much to all of the people that I named. You mean a lot to me, and your work and your spirit won't be forgotten, and it should be talked about when we talk about people that had boots on the ground during this COVID crisis. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story, Anthony. It's really great to hear what people are actually doing out in the field to make a difference in our city. The fight to end homelessness seems more doable, knowing that we have great people committed to this work. Next, we're going to hear from my good friend of many years, Beth Navarro. Beth is the founder and executive director of Communities Actively Living Independent and Free, CALIF, a nonprofit advocacy and service center for people with disabilities in central Los Angeles area. She is a pioneer disability rights activist who went to jail many times until the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, of 1990. Always fighting the good fight. Because housing remains a critical need for the disability community, CALIF offers housing advocacy as a core service. In the mid-2000s, CALIF, along with 2 other nonprofit organizations, brought suit and won against the city of Los Angeles for its failure to comply with the Fair Housing Act and the ADA. Beth, however, is most fulfilled by direct contact with consumers, especially those who care enough to share their struggles and wins with her. Please welcome my friend, Beth.
I'm Beth Navarro, founder and executive director of CALIFE. I've been involved in the disability rights movement since the early 80s. We have huge numbers of homeless people among our ranks too. So for wheelchair users, you're still homeless when you have to sleep on the couch because the bedroom door is too tight for you to get in, and when you have to use the living room for a toilet and shower because you can't pass through a very tight bathroom door. Over the years, I've become friends with the homeless. Tony Ann is one of them, and this is not her real name. Tony Ann was once a civil engineer working for a huge company. She fell on hard times due to a relapse into mental illness from domestic abuse. She was homeless, but she camouflaged her situation very well and always came to visit us at the office dressed fashionably. She was often in a fight with her landlord who would throw her out on the street, after which she rode the metro buses all day for shelter with the final stop at Union Station to sleep on the benches, which Metro eventually disallowed. She would be incommunicado on and off until one day, after a long absence, Tony resurfaced from a very bad bout of pneumonia. So on a Holy Thursday, she got discharged from the hospital and she was on her way to sleep on one of the benches by the Santa Monica Pier because she had nowhere to go. She was looking frail and thin, and looking her age, 70 plus. I was worried that she'd get sick again, so I offered my couch, which was my only available space for a home. She stayed with me for 4 months, and we got along quite well. When we went on little trips to the store, she would suddenly stop to say hi to Manuel sleeping under a big empty box on the street, or someone else among her friends she would bring food for. Since my relatives wanted to visit from the East Coast, I had to make room for them and had to have a heart-to-heart talk with Tony Ann about getting her more secure housing as she ages. She eventually agreed to a temporary shelter where she could have a roommate, meals, basic cleaning of her room, and laundry facilities. Daily she complained about the board and care, but there she could come and go as she pleased and eventually learned a new skill of using food and store coupons, fast food coupons, when she no longer could take the menu. Generally, people hate to live in these institutions because they devour 95% of their monthly income, which is why Section 8 is the favorite mode of housing for the poor. Housing is one of our core services at Kalife, an independent living center serving the disability community in central Los Angeles. We've been there for 20 years. Over the years, we noticed the outrageous lack of accessible and affordable housing. We did surveys and sent out people to test the system, and we found massive non-compliance with fair housing laws and the Americans with Disabilities Act. We, with two other organizations, eventually filed a lawsuit against the City of LA, and we won with a housing settlement that mandates, among other things, the modification and building of more accessible housing. We were promised 4,250 units in a span of 10 years. We wanted a website with clear descriptions of accessible housing units. We wanted the proper training on federal and housing laws and the ADA standards, a review of the housing policies to remove all the policy barriers, and the momentous housing victory truly opened more doors for our consumers. So this is Beth Navarro, and I'm your neighbor.
Thank you, Lily Beth. The depth of your heart knows no bounds. I am so thankful for the contributions you make to our community, both personally and professionally. Next up, I am so excited to introduce Marissa Hamamoto, named one of 13 People Magazine's Women Changing the World 2021 and one of 9 female leaders reimagining sport for the Adidas International Women's Day Campaign 2020. Marissa Hamamoto is a stroke survivor, speaker, dancer, and founder of Infinite Flow Dance. Marissa empowers people through dance and storytelling to think outside the box, dismantle biases, build connections, and rise to a higher purpose. Please welcome your neighbor, Marissa.
Hi, my name is Marissa Hamamoto. I'm a dancer, stroke survivor, and founder of Infinite Flow, which is a nonprofit and professional dance company composed of dancers with and without disabilities with a mission to dismantle biases and promote inclusion, and we are based here in Los Angeles. I've been in the media here and there, and the story that usually gets told is Marissa, the stroke survivor, eventually creates Infinite Flow. But this is just a fraction of my story, so I'm going to share with you just a little bit more. So I'm 4th generation Japanese American, and I grew up in Irvine, California during the 80s and 90s. My earliest memory of experiencing anti-Asian discrimination was when I was only 7 years old. I attended a predominantly white elementary school, and I was playing with my Chinese friend Alice during recess. And Alice and I were probably one of the only Asian Americans in our grade, possibly our school. And during recess, we were playing with each other, and a group of white boys ran over to us just to make fun of our eyes. And this was the first time I felt like the other, and this feeling of feeling like the other continued at school. On the other hand, I attended weekly ballet classes after school, and though I was the only girl of color in these ballet classes, something about moving my body to music with the other girls made me feel like I belonged. Dance soon became my passion and my life. Dance is a universal language, and dance in its purest form is an inclusive activity that belongs to each of us. But my pursuit to finding my path as a dancer was nothing close to that. Throughout my dance career, I've been repeatedly told that my body is not right for dancing. And during my late teens, I was sexually assaulted by a ballet teacher who also didn't believe in me. And this incident furthered the feeling that I didn't belong. In 2006, while a college student, I suffered a stroke in my spinal cord, which paralyzed me from the neck down. Fast forward, 2 months later, I walked out of the hospital, but I was still paralyzed on the inside. The stroke had triggered years of trauma from racism, body shaming, rejection, and sexual assault. In 2010, I returned to dancing through discovering ballroom dancing, and in 2012, I moved to Los Angeles to have a fresh start to my dance career. But when I arrived, I found myself again not fitting the box of the Hollywood dancer, and on multiple occasions, I was told that Asians don't fit the role of a ballroom or salsa dancer. In 2014, a simple Google search on dance and paralysis changed my life forever. I was shocked to learn that 1 in 4 Americans, that is 61 million Americans, have a disability, yet when I look around, dance was far from being equally accessible for people with disabilities, and I knew in my gut that it was my destiny to do something about this. I found a paraplegic bodybuilder named Adelpho and asked him to dance with me. Though Adelpho was completely new at dancing, after a couple hours of dancing with him, I had this magical moment where I realized that dancing with Adelpho was nothing different from dancing with anyone else, that dance doesn't discriminate, and when you're dancing with someone, you see beyond race, color, size, age, gender, ability, and disability. And that night, all I can think of was, oh my gosh, if the world danced, there wouldn't be any war, and I have to share this with the world. And a few months later, in 2015, Infinite Flow was born. After feeling like the other my entire life, I made it my life mission to create a world without boxes, where we each feel like we belong and we are celebrated for our unique qualities. In conclusion, this is what I want to say. When in doubt, focus out. We can each be a change maker, and we can create change in our own unique way. My name is Marissa Hamamoto, and I'm your neighbor.
Thank you, Marissa. You're a wonderful example of why I love our community so much. There's so much diversity within the disability community, and your story demonstrates that perfectly. Thank you for all your great work. Next, we'll hear from my colleague, Mariel Kriesel. Mariel is a program manager of systems change advocacy at Disability Community Resource Center, a local statewide source of nonprofit advocacy and social service provision to intersectional cross-disability residents across the lifespan on the West Side. Mariel began her career as a paralegal in 2013 for several West Side disability law attorneys, where she managed intersectional cross-disability cases from intake to settlement involving disability discrimination, special education, and access. The combination of these experiences and living as a woman with a congenital spinal cord injury and wheelchair user fuel her vision to eliminate intersectional disability discrimination through legal advocacy, public policy, education, and outreach. Please welcome your neighbor, my friend, Mariel.
I grew up with a significant congenital spinal cord injury, using crutches to walk, until my 30s when I began using a wheelchair. I grew up in a middle-class Los Angeles suburb. My father had the same job as long as I knew him. He didn't like his work or his career, but he stayed because supporting his family was what he valued the most in life. When my parents built a new home in 2000 and moved after 30 years of residency, our family home was dismantled by the new owners and a new structure built on that foundation. I learned from my dad the significance of stability, so the demolition felt like a loss of my history in some ways. I lived in that house for 18 years until I moved out to attend college, where I lived in a dorm. After college, I moved around a lot, never feeling like I belonged anywhere, and had difficulties finding the right job opportunity. I eventually realized that quality housing is determined by level of income. The U.S. Department of Labor Statistics reports that in 2020, 17.9% of persons with a disability were employed, down from 19.3% in 2019. For persons without a disability, 61.8% were employed in 2020, down from 66.3% in the prior year. The unemployment rates for persons with and without a disability both increased from 2019 to 2020 to 12.6% and 7.9% respectively. Data on both groups for 2020 reflect the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and efforts to mitigate it. Good, how are you? Let me have a real quick look here. I think it's right here, isn't it? Okay, so I think I'd like to get the grilled cheese. Stigmatization and disability are the measures of poverty and inequality in the U.S. because disability is the master trope of human disqualification, according to disability studies scholars Sharon Snyder and David Mitchell. Implicit biases that existed before the pandemic, such as fears of expensive reasonable accommodations and low expectations, eliminate people with disabilities from the workplace. People with disabilities should have the right in a free market economy to build a career and contribute their talents and achievements to the workplace. Equity increases access and opportunity to the workplace. But giving people with disabilities equitable access to work and the chance to succeed, that is empowerment. I've learned in life, employment is inextricably linked to stable quality housing and belonging in the community. My name is Mariel, and I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Mariel. What a great video and story. It is such a pleasure to work alongside you at the Disability Community Resource Center, and it is no doubt why you are such a strong advocate in this space. Next, we're going to hear from Vanessa Luna, who serves as Associate Director of Multifamily Housing at Brilliant Corners. Ms. Luna joined the Brilliant Corners team in March 2020 with 14 years of experience in supportive housing development focused on the Los Angeles area. Over the last 7 years, during her time as housing director for a Los Angeles-based nonprofit, Vanessa added 356 supportive and affordable housing units among 6 low-income housing tax credit developments to the pipeline. Together, these totaled over $100 million in financing. Over 200 of these units were for households experiencing homelessness or with special needs. Ms. Luna also has an interest in the intersection of affordable housing with issues of environmental justice and climate resiliency. Please welcome your neighbor, Vanessa Luna.
Thank you for that introduction. I chose to join BC about a year ago because I believe in Brilliant Corners' mission. Brilliant Corners believes, like I do, that everyone deserves a safe place to live, regardless of their circumstances. At Brilliant Corners, we're focused on helping people who are experiencing homelessness, people with developmental disabilities, and people who are vulnerable in many different ways. Like the clients we serve, the solutions that we use to help them are varied and multifaceted. We have direct services, direct case management for people. We have a whole team of people in property management who are experienced in supportive housing. And we also have a team of people that lease units directly from landlords on the private market to get people housed faster. And we have our development department. For years now, our development department has been developing and rehabbing residential care homes for people with developmental disabilities. We now have about 250 of them throughout the state of California. And great care is taken in the design and construction of these homes to ensure that they meet the needs of our residents for the long term. And just recently, we began our multifamily supportive housing combined with services as well. Everything that we do, though, is really with the lens of getting people housed faster, but also ensuring that they remain housed, they have the supports they need, and that we're putting them in quality housing. Avalon 1355 that I've been working on for about a year since I joined is no exception. It'll provide 54 apartments, studios and 1 bedrooms, combined with services for people who are homeless and experiencing mental illness. People will have, in addition to their very own apartment to call home, they'll have on-site amenities like a community room and a laundry facility, and they'll have access to full-time staff working in the building, like a resident services coordinator and a case manager. The case manager will help them develop individualized service plans to focus on their very specific needs for what they need in order to support themselves and remain housed. And they'll also help them link up with other services, such as requesting benefits that they're eligible for and wouldn't know how to navigate otherwise. One of the really unique and things that makes supportive housing so successful is the collaboration of the services team with property management. If there's ever an issue that threatens someone's tenancy, services and property management will work together with the resident to help address the problem and develop a plan for it so that they remain housed. And we're doing it. Back when I started my career in supportive housing development about 15 years ago, housing was a problem and homelessness was a problem. I saw it then and I continue to see it today in my community and throughout Los Angeles. But it doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be in the US or in Los Angeles. Imagine if we put the resources that we put towards criminalizing people in jails toward housing and other community benefits. It's not that our solutions like supportive housing aren't working, it's that we're not putting these resources, enough resources towards them. I think our communities deserve better. I'm going to continue to fight for better, and I hope you do too. My name is Vanessa, and I'm your neighbor.
Thank you, Vanessa. In a world with so many problems, it's reassuring to know that there are people like you focused on solutions. Thank you for your work. Next, we're going to hear from Christopher Lewis, a CHS Speak Up advocate who never gave up faith despite his world being turned upside down. His story reminds us why access to mental health care and other resources is critical. Please welcome your neighbor, Christopher.
Hi, I'm Christopher Lewis, and once upon a time I was a hard-working guy. I had 2 jobs, and once I even had 3 jobs, until I had a nervous breakdown. Then I became homeless in Santa Monica. I lost everything, my job and my girlfriend. My homeless companion was very negative. He used to whoop me with scriptures. He said that we were gonna die there. But I told him, no, I'm not gonna die here. My God is gonna open up a door for me. And as we slept in a parking lot in Santa Monica, he said, look around you. Do you see any doors? A few days later at OPCC, social service, now called the People's Concern, it was a first come, first served policy. The first 10 people would see the doctor, next 10 people would see the social service. But I was nowhere in line for that. I was just in the waiting room just to get out of the cold. And then the intake nurse came out and she said, hey, you, come here. And it frightened me. I thought I was in trouble. But it turns out she would send me right to the doctor to get medical assistance. And they put me in the shelter hospice. I also got connected to a psychiatrist, which caused me some apprehension. And I found out that I was bipolar and diabetic. With the bipolar prognosis, a light came on. Boom. And it explained a whole lot that was in my life. No wonder I lost my girlfriend. My whole world was once again turned upside down. I now have a whole bag of medicine. And it turned out to be best for me because the medicine really calmed me down. Now I'm a CSH Speak Up advocate. And just before the pandemic, I graduated from a wellness recovery and action training program. And now life is good. I'm Christopher Lewis. I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Christopher, for never giving up and showing others that healing is possible. Our final speaker is Elise Buick, President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. Please welcome Elise.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our virtual Stories from the Frontline, and more importantly, for showing your support of helping us to end homelessness in Los Angeles County. I'd like to thank TJ for emceeing today's event and all the incredible work he does with the Disability Community Resource Center. Our most recent homeless count shows that there are 5,000 people who experience homelessness and live with a developmental disability, and almost 11,000 who deal with a physical disability. We know that these individuals are at much higher risk of violence and being targeted with discrimination and even premature death. That's why we must all do everything in our power to break down the structural barriers and also the barriers of attitudes that prevent us from creating a more just and inclusive society. The Stories from the Frontline event really reminds us of why we launched this series, and that is really to help open people's hearts and minds to become agents of change and to really inspire each other to create real systemic change in LA County. I am so inspired by the stories that we've heard today, and I think that they do so much to inspire all of us to do more, to do all that we can, to really show what is possible as we fight for solutions to bring everyone home, and making sure that everyone has access to affordable and supportive housing, no matter who they are, that they in fact have a right to housing. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Elise Buick, and I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Elise, and thank you for your work on behalf of the United Way. So many people came together to make this afternoon possible, and for that, we are grateful. Thank you to everyone who shared such powerful stories. I want to specifically thank today's partners, our co-hosts, Stories from the Frontline, the John and Marilyn Wells Family Foundation, Disability Community Resource Center, Communities Actively Living Independently and Free, Infinite Flow Dance, Department of Mental Health, Brilliant Corners, and everyone who shared their personal stories with us today. If you haven't already signed up, sign up and join everyone in at www.everyoneinla.org. Tune in on May 27th for engaging workshop about how racial justice is essential in order to heal the wounds and fix our social and economic systems. Visit www.everyoneinla.org/events to sign up. Thanks again for being with us today. I'm TJ, and I'm your neighbor.